Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma, and today I'm going to talk to you about the myriad of fantabulous books that I read in April. So the beady-eyed among you may be like, Gemma, you have a new filming setup. Yeah, just for hopefully today, the old ball and chain is doing some work in the ensuite in our bedroom. So my bedroom where I usually film is out of bounds. I feel like we're on the wonk. Are we on the wonk? Maybe. So in April, I read 12 books, and so a straight up third were 5-star books. So it was just a brilliant reading month. I did DNF1. So let's get into it. Before I talk about the books, as always, I'll just give you a bit of an update on goals. So the 3 things that I update you on each month are my non-UK, non-US stats. So I'm trying to read 50% UK, US and 50% non-UK, non-US or more if possible. I'm still failing at this goal. So in April, only 4 out of the 12 that I read were by non-UK, non-US authors. I had a New Zealander, a Canadian, a Nigerian and a Japanese author, which means 33%. And my overall total for the year is at 30%. So I do still have quite some catching up to do on that, but c'est la vie. We'll get there. Then I have my BookTube inspired TBR of 12 books, and I have finally put together a little doobry. Which ones I have and haven't read, and we are at 3 out of 12. So obviously there's 12, that was the 4th month, so I should really be at 4 out of 12, but I'm not. So I do have a little bit of catching up to do there. Then for my 100 book bucket list challenge, I have also read 3, but there are only 10 of those. So I think we're still roughly okay-ish. So yes. So what did I read? Well, the book that I DNF'd, so the book at the bottom of my pile for April was Cursed Bread by Sophie Makintosh. I DNF'd this pretty early on. I think I only read about 20-30 pages of it, and it just, the style wasn't for me. I was just really bored. I didn't want to pick it up, and I'd heard a few negative things about it. And then just to top it off, my lovely friend Jennifer loves books, loved this book. And generally, not always, but generally, if Jennifer loves a book, I hate it, and vice versa. So when I got 30 pages in and I was like, I don't know if I like this, and Jennifer loved it, I was like, yes, probably not a Gemma book. So I DNF'd that pretty swiftly, and there was a huge queue for it because I got it from the library. So I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to take it back, let someone else enjoy it, because I am not. I couldn't even really tell you what it was about. Some weird baker's wife. They were just doing weird things. There was like this scene where one guy, an ambassador, was like holding his wife's jaw whilst having a conversation with another couple. It just, like, I just couldn't picture what Sophie Makintosh was trying to describe at all. It just felt really bizarre. Then in at number 12, with my only 2-star book of the month, and that was Pod by Laline Paull. If you have been following the Plod Along, which is a women's prize read along, gossipy, waffly situation that is hosted by myself and Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf and Charlie at Charlie Book Reads. We have talked about this quite a lot, but basically I detested this book. I gravitate towards books with traumatic themes and hard-hitting messages, but even I don't need that much rape in a book. This is told from the perspective of a dolphin who is a spinner dolphin, and then she can't spin properly because of whatever, and then she separates from her pod, and then we sort of follow her out into the deep blue sea. There are some other characters that we follow as well. Google was quite interesting. He was like a military dolphin sent on missions. And a Napoleon wrasse. I will put a picture of what that is here. Yeah, that they were some weird chapters that yeah, there was there was a lot of rape. There was a lot of dolphins getting high, and there was some clam orgies. None of those things appealed to me as a reader. Obviously, there was a bigger message around climate change and pollution of the oceans and all that jazz, but it just didn't work for me. In 11th place, and I was really disappointed by this one, we have The Keeper's Six by Kate Elliott. Now, I read Kate Elliott's series Crown of Stars many, many years ago and adored it. 7-book, big, fat, chunky fantasy series, one of my favourite fantasy series of all time. And then I was talking to Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot, and Dia at Novel Idea, and Jack at Spread Bookjoy. And we were talking about picking up a fantasy book together, and someone suggested this, and I was like, yes, Kate Elliott is brilliant. But this book was not. Kate Elliott needs to stick to 700-page books because she cannot write a novella. This was super short. The premise was really interesting about this sort of almost heist-esque group where everyone has different roles, and it kicks off with the sort of main character. Her son rings her, and he's been kidnapped, and she has to find him and find a way to get him back. And she brings her six to try and help find him. And then there's that, yeah. Anyway, the point the point is that there was just too much going on for the length of book. Everything felt rushed. Nothing was properly explained. None of the sort of interesting elements of the story were gone into deeply enough, and I think we were all in agreement on that. And then the ending was just a complete rush. So yeah, it's a shame, because I think actually if this book had been 500-600 pages, it could have been a really good story, but it just didn't work for me. But I did enjoy the experience of buddy reading with all those lovely ladies, so silver linings. In at number 10, another one that I was quite disappointed with, and we're up to 3-star now, so The Keeper's Six was 2.5 stars. But we have To Strip the Flesh by Otto Toda. But this is a manga, and Otto Toda is a trans author, so I read this for Trans Girl April. The translator is also trans, and this was short stories. So the first story, which takes up like half the book, was pretty good. It was about you start with a young girl, and she is sort of doing a YouTube thing around hunting, and then you delve in a little deeper and find out that they're actually not a girl, they are a boy, and like how they transition and the conversations that they have with their father. And yeah, it was just really, really quite a good story. I wouldn't say it was like epic, but it was okay. The rest of the stories were just quite random, I would say, and quite short. And just when it's a manga anyway, there's not a lot of words to a page, so then to have really short manga stories, there wasn't a lot. And then right at the end, they had like 2-page stories, and it just didn't really work for me, unfortunately. The title story, To Strip the Flesh, was worth a read, I would say. Next up, we have poetry. Yes, who am I? I have read poetry every month this year. I don't know what's happening to me, but I read Even This Page Is White by Vivek Shraya. This again was one of my picks for Trans Girl April, and in this, Vivek Shraya is interrogating a lot of different things around sexuality, gender, race. There are some parts in it that are more essay than poem. There was a particular section where Shraya asked her friends what it was to be an ally and things like that, and it was just, that section I thought was outstanding, 5-star. The poems themselves, I could take them or leave them. Shraya was being quite experimental in some of the layouts of the poems and things, which I think if you are a poetry person, you would probably really like that, but it was just too much for my minute poetry brain to to cope with. So I gave it 3.5 stars, but it probably wasn't the biggest poetry success that I have had this year. And now, in 8th position, we are now moving into 4-star territory, so you can see what a good month this was. But the Book in 8th position for the month is The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. Lots of people have talked about this super cute graphic novel about a young girl who is sort of apprenticing to be a blacksmith, and then she sort of stumbles upon this guy who raises tea dragons, and she sort of gets involved and she makes a nice friend, and it's all just very, very cute. So I have actually ordered the next two because this is a trilogy from the library, and I think the second one has come in. I've already got the third one upstairs, so I will hopefully be reading the rest of this cute little graphic novel series in May. Then we have Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stuart, which I feel like I'm the last person on BookTube to read this, so please let me know if you haven't read this, so that I don't feel like I am the last one. But I think everyone's pretty au fait with this story. We're following a young boy growing up in poverty in Glasgow with a mother who is an alcoholic, and Shuggie himself is struggling a little bit with his sexuality and where that fits within this poverty-stricken Glasgow. I did enjoy this. I would say it's actually a bit bleak for me. It's just, there is just no hope really in this book at all. It very much is focused on Shuggie's mother Agnes and her struggle with addiction, and obviously we do see the effect of that on Shuggie and his brother and sister and how that sort of affects Shuggie. But it really was Agnes's story of addiction, and it was a pretty heartbreaking one. So I did enjoy this, but I needed just a little glimmer of some sort of hope in the book. I read this for my works book club, and I spoke to my boss, who was also reading it, and he picked up the audiobook and he said, I got up in the morning, Gemma, and I was in such a good mood, and I got in the car and I put on the audiobook, and by the time I got home 2 hours later, I was so depressed I had to take the dogs out for a walk. I was just like, oh. So yeah, mixed reviews for this one from the work lot. Some people who loved it, some people who really didn't like it, and some who, like me, enjoyed it enough but felt it was maybe a little bit too bleak. So that was Shuggie Bain. Into 6th position, and we're up to 4.5 stars, we have Welcome to St. Hell by Lewis Hancox, and this was another Trans Girl April pick. Lewis Hancox is a trans man, a cartoonist, comicist, artist, designer, drawer, and very, very funny. He does have a YouTube channel. I'll link it below so you can go check him out because it's brilliant. And I really liked watching his video on Welcome to St. Hell. I thought it was really interesting. And this was a lovely graphic novel. It showed his journey through childhood of trying to be a girl and trying to act like a girl and finding that just didn't work, and then doing some things that weren't super healthy in order to affect his body shape and things like that. Jack over at Spread Bookjoy has done a fantastic solo review for this book, so I will link that below. Highly recommend you check that out. She has a spoiler-free section at the beginning and then a spoiler section at the end, so whether you've read it or not, you can get something out of that review. Yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed this. I think it really opened my eyes to some of the struggles that trans teens go through. And what Hancox did very well was he sort of was talking to his younger self and sort of trying to like cheer him on and say, you know, that's okay, things are going to get better, you can do this, or that probably wasn't your best idea. And it was just quite funny to have that commentary running through it. You can see that Lewis Hancox doesn't take himself super seriously, and that really came across in his work, even though it is a very serious topic. This is definitely the kind of book that I think needs to be available to certainly teenagers in high school, upper high school, because it's something that certainly was never discussed when I was at school. And I can imagine if you are a trans teen, you do not see yourself in literature anywhere really, and to be able to see that in a school library would be really, really quite helpful. So yes, really, really enjoyed that book. Next 4.5 star read, which was a surprise, also a Trans Girl April pick, and that was You Made a Fool Out of Death with Your Beauty by Emezi. So the reason this was a surprise was because I don't love romance. And I read this with Jack, who I have mentioned several times already in this video, at Spread Book Joy. Check her out, she's fantastic, if you weren't aware that I thought that. And Jack is also not a super romance fan. We have very, very similar tastes in books. So we both went into this cautiously, I would say, but Emezi has such a brilliant reputation, and I know that other people who don't particularly love romance have gotten on with this book, and I was so pleasantly surprised. I was completely sucked in. The main character was completely likable. She is recovering from a trauma, and you see that right at the very, very beginning of the book. She's had a traumatic past, but she's trying to move on with her romantic life, and she doesn't always make the best decisions in that, and the story sort of takes off from there. I don't really want to say any more about the plot, because I think a lot of the joy of the book is discovering it as you go. But the characters were brilliant, particularly the main character and her best friend were exceptional. The best friend was so dryly funny. Loved that. Loved it. And yeah, I would highly recommend to all readers. And now we're into 5-star territory for the last 4 books of the month. And to rank these was so difficult, and I think it could be ranked differently on a different day, because all of these were just amazing. So in at 4th we have Goodnight Mister Tom by Michelle Magorian. I was part of a live show for this, because this was one of the FOMO book club picks, which I run with Jack at Spread Book Joy and Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. So we did a live on Jack's channel. I will link that below if you want to check that out. It is spoiler filled. This was just such a lovely book. If you haven't heard of Goodnight Mr. Tom, it's about a young boy who is evacuated during the Second World War. He comes from a very challenging background in London, and he rocks up at Mr. Tom's door. Mr. Tom is a sort of curmudgeonly old man who no one in the village really talks to, because he's such a grumpy old bugger. And you sort of see this relationship between this boy and this old man develop, and I cried several times, including at my son's swimming lesson. Don't take Mr. Tom to a swimming lesson, is my advice. And yeah, it was just heartwarming and heartbreaking in equal measure, and I really, really highly recommend it. In 3rd position for the month, we have Know My Name by Chanel Miller, which I buddy read with the lovely Jaylene at Bookworm Adventure Girl. And I'm really glad that we buddy read it, actually, because we had some really good discussions around victim blaming and the strength of women, and yeah, and just the way the legal system is geared against victims. So Know My Name is a non-fiction account of Chanel Miller's experience after being sexually assaulted by Brock Turner, and the ensuing court case, and how she really dealt with all of that. And yeah, it was heartbreaking to read. She wrote a victim statement, which, because I listened to this on audio, she read that victim statement at the end, and I cried my eyes out. Just the effect that this had on her, not just the sexual assault, but Brock Turner's attitude towards it, and the attitude of some of the people afterwards mixed up in the legal affairs. And yeah, it was just heartbreaking and so anger inducing, the way that she was treated, but also unequivocally inspiring. This is an inspiring young woman who really laid her soul bare in this book, and I can't commend her enough for that, because I know that there'll be a lot of women out there who can relate to what she went through, and I'm sure that that helps them a lot. So yes, excellent book, 5 stars. In 2nd place, we have The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. I buddy read this with Fraser at Fraser Simon's Springboard Thought, Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot, and Sarah at Freshly Read Books. And oh, it was so lovely. It was just such a lovely book. It is my last Becky Chambers. I've now read all of her work, and this really didn't disappoint. It's very reminiscent of the first book, A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. We have quite a small cast of characters, and we sort of see their interactions. This is a sci-fi, so they're all different species. They have different quirks and different strengths and weaknesses, and yeah, one of the characters is loosely linked to one of the characters in the first book. So you sort of have a rough understanding of who she is. But I just love the concepts that Becky Chambers puts into them, into her stories. Particularly in this one, there were some themes around motherhood that I really, really thought were very, very interesting. And yeah, I just adored it. I just adored it. I think it's my favourite of the Wayfarer series. And yeah, if you haven't read Becky Chambers, why not? Why not? I've been raving about her for a while. You need to read some Becky Chambers. And so that leaves my number one spot for the month, and probably, no, and absolutely my favourite book for the whole year. But I'm not going to linger on it because I've done a solo review, and that is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, where we follow Demon, who is growing up in poverty in the Appalachian Mountains, dealing with a lot of trauma, mother with addiction. Actually, not entirely dissimilar to Shuggie Bain. However, the character of Demon for me is what made this book shine. If you want to really see my thoughts, spoiler free thoughts on that, I have done a solo review, so I'll leave it here. And that is everything for the month. So tell me, what were your best books of April, and what were your worst books of April? And I will be back very soon with another one. Bye, guys.